A2CAF 2019. Author discussion. Raina Telgemeier and Jerry Kraft.
So hi, welcome to the panel. I'm calling this panel A2 Craft because your name is Kraft and the show is called A2CAF, and I thought that would be amazing.
That's amazing.
I didn't tell you that in advance, so you weren't ready for the joke. So my name's Raina Telgemeier. I am the author and illustrator of several graphic novels aimed at a middle grade audience, including Smile, Sisters, Drama, Ghosts. I have a book coming out in September called Guts. It is a prequel to Smile. Pretty excited about that. I also have a how-to interactive journal out called Share Your Smile for people that are interested in writing and illustrating their own graphic novels. And that is not why we're here today. We are here today to welcome my friend Jerry.
I don't know if any of you have heard of Raina, but you can give her a big hand for coming to do that. Just to encourage her so she'll stay in the business.
Only if Jerry says so. So I'm here to welcome Jerry Kraft. Jerry is an author and illustrator who has worked on numerous picture books, graphic novels, and middle grade novels. His newest book, New Kid, is a middle grade graphic novel that has earned 4-starred reviews, including one from Booklist magazine that called it one of the most important graphic novels of the year. Kirkus said it should be required reading in every middle school in America, and I'm going to amend that and say, and elementary school. He is the creator of Mama's Boys, an award-winning comic strip that was distributed by King Feature Syndicate from 1995 to 2013. He is a co-founder and co-producer of the Schomburg's annual Black Comic Book Festival, which has drawn close to 50,000 fans since its inception in 2013. So welcome, Jerry.
Thank you.
So, the first question I have for you is, can you give us the elevator pitch for your graphic novel, New Kid?
Okay, so New Kid is about a 12-year-old named Jordan Banks who has always gone to small schools, and he wants to be an artist, and his parents do not want him to be an artist because, of course, you cannot make a living as an artist.
No.
And so instead of getting to go to the art school of his dreams, his parents make him go to this prestigious private school where now he's one of only a few kids of color in the entire school. So he's the new kid, one of the few kids of color, and trying to kind of live both lives, you know, his life around his neighborhood and his life around this new prestigious private school.
And can you tell us a little bit about what you and Jordan have in common? He is a fictional character, but it is somewhat inspired by your life, is that correct?
Yeah, he being Jordan, not he being me, right?
That's exactly what I mean.
Right.
The J thing, it gets me every time.
Yes. So, so like Jordan, I was always one of the youngest and the smallest kids in my class. And it literally was not until 12th grade, from 12th grade through college, I grew like 8 inches. You know, so I go back to my high school reunions and people don't know who I am because they expect me to still be like 5'3". So Jordan, like me, always one of the youngest and the smallest. Everyone else is 13, he's 12, and he's like 4 inches shorter than everyone. He wants to be an artist, like I did. I thought at one point I'd be the next great artist of Spiderman. And then the commute from Washington Heights in New York City all the way up to the big private school in Riverdale. So that's all me.
How long was that commute?
It was about an hour by public transportation. I got on the bus that would take us up, and then got off on another bus that would go around this big hill and up on this hill to Riverdale, where it's like there's the Fielston School.
Isn't Riverdale the name of the Archie town too?
Yeah, and I think that's the same Riverdale, and also I don't know where the Riverdale, there's a TV show on CW called Riverdale.
Yeah.
I don't know where that is. But yeah, that's Riverdale.
And I know that you've talked in the past about the fact that you were not a big reader as a kid. But I've heard you say, I didn't read books, but I did read comic books.
Yes.
Can you talk about some of those memories?
Yeah, so my earliest reading was like the Dr. Seuss books. So I remember, Fish Out of Water, in One Fish, Two Fish, Red for Blue Fish, and Cat in the Hat and all that, Horton Hears Who, that was great. And then I don't remember really anything in between going to like Spider-Man comics, and then after Spider-Man, I don't really remember anything after that until, you know why? Because in I specifically remember in 7th and 8th grade, if the teachers caught you with comic books, they would confiscate them. And at the end of the year, some teachers would have more comics in their drawer than some kids had at home because they would just take them. So in my mind, it was always like, fun reading is like illegal. And if you wanted to read, you had to like suffer through it. So I always equated reading as like a chore, you know? And it really wasn't until like high school where I remember reading a book and enjoying it and going, wow, that wasn't painful at all. You know, so yeah, it was a really weird thing that they did to me. And I know that when we went to TLA, there was someone that told me that their school, if they see them reading graphic novels, actually confiscate them, and the kids have to buy them back like they have to pay for their cell phone. Like they confiscate their cell phone, and then you have to pay like $15 to get it back. So in some schools, unfortunately, that's still happening.
We have a lot of bones to pick about the way that adults sometimes treat kids who like to read comics.
Yes, we need to get picket signs and find that school.
So this has been happening for a long time.
Yes.
Adults have been judging kids who read comics for many, many years. Do you remember what your teachers would say? Was it that it was junk reading, or that it wasn't real reading, or?
It was rotting your brain.
Rotting your brain. So everybody in this building today is getting their brain rotted.
Yes, absolutely.
Together, and we're all having such a good time doing it.
But you know, the weird thing is, like with Marvel Comics, I realized that when I started to read real books, my vocabulary was so intense and immense because, like, especially with Marvel Comics, like every comic had like this qualifying adjective in front of it. It was like the uncanny X-Men, the macabre Man-Thing, astonishing tales, spectacular Spiderman, the Incredible Hulk. And those were all like big words.
Yeah.
And I was 12, but I knew what Armageddon was because I had to look it up. And every week there was Armageddon happening, you know, and Havoc and, you know, some of these things. And a lot of them based on like Greek mythology. So, you know, you have to read up on Thor to see, you know, what was going on. And Captain America with World War II. Well, what's going on with that? You have to look that up.
Yeah.
And then just, you know, like I said, by the time I realized, I was like, oh, yeah, a lot of this stuff came from comics.
Yeah, I had the same experience with Calvin and Hobbes, where they would speak in such like giant vocabulary words.
Right.
And as a kid, I was like, this is funny.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure why it's funny. I just know that it's somehow working for me. Something about that combination of the characters, the expressions that they're making, the thing they were doing at the time, and then these big words they're using. I'd better go try and figure out like, what they mean.
Transmogrification of the,
Yes.
like, is that a real word or let me look it up? You're right,
I'm like,
absolutely.
okay. And so yeah, there's a lot of like investigation and discovery that comes from reading comics and being inspired to like figure out what's going on.
Yep.
But the pictures are there to give you a clue.
Right.
So it works on so many different levels. So you talked about Marvel Comics, and you talk in your book about Batman a lot. And so do you remember the first comic character that you really connected with?
It was between Spider-Man and the Silver Surfer.
Interesting.
Yep. And Spider-Man, I think, because he was, you know, young and he was kind of nerdy and, you know, kind of a, you know, science nerd kind of thing. I mean, literally like everything that most middle grade graphic novels,
Yes.
It's that character. So Peter Parker could easily hang out with Raina or Jordan or any of the characters that you see. And, you know, having this immense power, but not being able to tell anyone, you know, like not being able to join the basketball team and like jump 50 feet and dunk every ball and stuff like that was like a really intense thing. And that he wasn't the popular guy. He got pushed around by Flash Thompson, who at any moment he could just, you know, throw a city block, you know, but he had to kind of keep his sensibilities about him. So I thought that was really cool.
And what about the Silver Surfer? I admit that I don't know anything about the Silver Surfer except that he is silver and
Yes.
he has a surfboard.
Yes,
Like,
that's the two key
those are two
components.
awesome things, by
Right.
the way. Like, I get it, but
So he was in one of the really bad Fantastic Four movies, unfortunately, but I thought he was pretty cool. But he was like, it was very Superman-ish, where he was like the last of his planet. This super being named Galactus came and was going to destroy his planet. And he was like, okay, well, if you don't destroy my planet, I will serve you and I will find new planets for you to destroy. So he was like his herald. So I had Galactus, I learned that word, and Galactic, and his herald and what that meant. And he was the skywriter of the spaceway. So all that vocabulary. So I thought he was pretty cool because he was also a loner, kind of never fit in anywhere.
The last of his kind.
Yes.
So common in superheroes. Do you remember the first comic convention you attended?
My dad used to take me in New York City, where I grew up. There was like a monthly convention that used to happen at like the Pennsylvania Hotel. And
I know this convention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was before comic artists and writers were treated as rock stars. So, you'd go there and they'd just be behind the table like, hey, how you doing? Like, oh yeah, I like the, can I say, oh yes, please, here, please take, I'll pay you to take my autograph. I met this letterer, Tom Orzechowski, and he was a letterer. I said, oh, okay, can I have your autograph? And he literally lettered the entire alphabet for me in my book. Again, because there wasn't lines for this. So he's like, okay, look how good I letter. A, B, C.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was like his version of doing a sketch.
Yeah.
In a sketchbook, he's like, I'm going to draw the alphabet.
Absolutely.
Watch how good I draw the alphabet.
Yep. And I was like,
man.
hey, thanks. I'm going to go now.
Did he use one of those little Ames guides? Or was it all freehand?
That one was freehand.
Oh, that's
how good he
hardcore.
was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what an Ames lettering guide is? Okay. It's a tool that you use to like make sure your lettering's all the same size. I've never used one. That's why my lettering's terrible.
Yep. It's just like this little silver thing that had like this little round part, and you'd stick your pen in it, and you'd move it over a letter, and then you go down to the next one, and that's how you would like rule to see like the line width, and then you'd write your letters in it.
It's a super nerdy tool, and it works perfectly.
Yes.
So do you remember when you started writing and drawing comics?
Yes, I always drew, like as long as I can remember. I actually have homework that I still have in 7th grade, and I would love getting back homework or any kind of thing where there'd only be like this many words up on top, so there'd be this much blank paper. So any blank paper, I was always drawing. And I think I started I remember when my brother was in the Marines in Okinawa, I would go to see movies, and I would come home and draw like summaries of the movies and mail to him.
Oh, on the bottom of your homework pages.
Oh, I think I used fresh paper on that. and then I started making comics, just regular copy paper and fold it, and I would draw. So I have one that I made in 6th grade that I still have, and then through high school I got better, and I remember one summer job I worked in a copy shop, and then I made like this comic that had like the binding in it and like the cardboard cover. And so I was intense.
So you were self-publishing, basically.
I was, yeah, absolutely.
At what age?
I mean, the comic book I made in 6th grade, the first one, but when I did like I think I was probably in college by then. I was able to go to an art school.
Yeah.
Yes, finally. I was old enough. By the time I went to college, I told my parents, look, this is not a fad. I will not be living in your basement until I'm 50. I moved out 6 weeks ago, so I showed them. So thank you for those of you who bought New Kid. And yeah, so then in college, School of Visual Arts, then my stuff got more intense.
More intense. When did you start like seeing that there was a path towards being an author? Or I don't know if author is quite the right word. I usually use the word cartoonist to describe my job, or graphic novelist, but when both of us were growing up, that career didn't really exist the way that it does now. There was no, this whole like marketplace didn't really exist back then. There were comic books, like big 2 superheroes. You could get a job working for them as a letterer, or as a colorist or as a inker or penciler, and then you could be like a picture book author illustrator.
Right.
Do you remember if you saw like any path forward for yourself specifically, or if there was like a role model that you had to be like, this is what I want to do when I grow up?
So I wanted to draw Marvel comics, and I was pretty good, but I wasn't good like professional to draw like Spiderman, because I could do the superhero stuff, but I never practiced drawing like the Peter Parker, like the alter egos. So that was not really good. And I was like, yeah. But I also like comic strips. And so before Calvin and Hobbes, you know, there was Beetle Bailey and Broomhilda and Peanuts, you know, so I like that kind. But there weren't really ever that many that had African-American characters. You know, if they did, they were, you know, kind of sidekicks like Franklin and Charlie Brown, who I always loved whenever they put him on. And then, so in college, I started coming up with a comic strip. And that's when I started playing around with the idea for Mama's Boys. But before Mama's Boys, it was called The Outside View. My dad used to bring home this local newspaper. And he'd show me, and there was a comic strip in there, and I absolutely hated it. It would just drive me crazy, you know. And one day, I'd always criticize it, and one day he was like, you know, he's in the paper and you're not. So, you know, and I was like, oh, it's like that, huh? So I called up the editor of that paper, and I asked him if I could bring him a comic strip. And we had he said, oh, yeah, come by in 2 weeks. So I did like a whole portfolio, and I went up, and he's like, okay, we'll run it. So a couple weeks later, my dad brings home the newspaper, and he opens it up. I open it up, and there's the one I hated, and I was like, yeah, who's that one by? You know, and that was like my first printed.
Wow.
Yeah, my first printed one.
And you did it just to show your dad.
Just to show my dad.
Oh man, I mean that's why all of us make comics, right?
Yes, to show your dad, right? So, yeah.
Dad's like, you can never do this, and you're like, yes, I can. I had a couple professors like that because I also went to School of Visual Arts who were like, Raina, comics is not a job. Like, you know, there's not money to be made in this. And I was like, I'm gonna show you, man.
Yeah, and now they're working for you. They're like, more tea, Ms. Telgemeier?
Yes, yes. So you then ended up writing and illustrating a syndicated comic strip.
Yep.
For just about 2 decades.
Yes.
Which is a long, long time, and it's very impressive. And I mean, that was one of the only pathways forward that I saw as a kid was like I could write a humor strip for. I mean, when I first read about this, I read about For Better or For Worse, and that she signed a contract for 20 years.
Yep.
And I was just like, wow, the pressure to like write storylines, draw those storylines, and be funny every single day for 20 years sounds like too much for me.
Yep. So you know,
I was just like,
when you said,
how, Jerry? How did you do that?
Well, you know, first of all, it was like I could never get it syndicated daily. So first I started by self-publishing. So I went through like these periodicals and sort of like weekly papers across the country. I sent them samples. I got about 10, 15 clients. So I would do a Mama's Boys comic strip every week and physically mail it to them, because this is before email.
Right.
So I would physically mail. Luckily, I worked at a company that had like free mail, so I just stick it and send it out to them. I was at King Features, a newspaper comic strip syndicate. And so
what were you doing at King Features, by the way?
I was working in the comic art department. So like if one panel, Dagwood from Blondie had on short sleeve shirt, and then the next panel, inexplicably, he had on a long sleeve shirt, I was the one that had to go and you know, fix it. Or if there were spelling errors, I had to fix that. So I would get the camera ready. So then it was sent to print. So I worked on like, you know, Beetle Bailey, and we had Mutts came in afterwards, and Zitz, and, you know, a lot of like the classic ones, Prince Valiant, Andy Cap. So it's a ton of them I used to have to kind of fix up.
Wow. So you were doing production work on other people's comic strips and simultaneously making your own.
Right. And then when I would write copy, so I went to School of Visual Arts to become a cartoonist, and they had like major teachers there, like Will Eisner and Harvey Kurtz. I could never get into a single cartooning class at SVA. So I ended up majoring in copywriting. So I was an ad agent, an ad person, and I majored in copywriting. So then my first jobs out of SVA were as an advertising copywriter.
Interesting.
So when I ended up working at King Features, I was like, hey, I can write copy too. So I would write the brochure for like, hey, there's a new strip called Mallard Fillmore, and I would write the copy for it and things like that.
And that must have been really good experience for like eventually pitching your own work.
Yeah, it was, although they never syndicated me daily, which
Okay.
I thought that if I worked there long enough, at some point I'd wear them down. They'd be like, all right already. And so I got weekly.
Okay.
And then I started self-publishing my books, and I started going to the National Cartoonist Society Awards. And there was one day I was there with my friend Jim Keefe, and I look over and there's Charles Schultz and Lynn Johnston. And I was like, let's go talk to them. Like, no, we can't do that. That's Charles Schultz and Lynn Johnston. So come on. So we went over, and they couldn't have been nicer.
Yeah.
And they were so nice. And when I self-published my first Mama's Boys book, it was a foreword from Lynn Johnston.
Oh my
From
goodness.
For Better, For Worse.
That's so cool.
Yep.
So this is a lesson to everybody in the audience. Like, go talk to people this weekend who you think are cool, because they're probably super nice too.
Yeah.
That's my experience anyway. And so, okay, a weekly comic strip for
Yep.
a very long time. Like, humor writing is really difficult for me. But did it come naturally to you? Was it a skill that you had to build? Like, writing funny is something that a lot of people are interested in learning how to do.
Right.
I wonder if there's anything that you could talk about as far as your experience and maybe words of wisdom.
Absolutely, because I had a friend of mine, so I was writing, I'd sit down each week and write a Mama's Boys comic strip, hopefully with a punchline that was funny. And one day, one of my friends just blatantly said, you know, your comic strip is not nearly as funny as you are in real life. And I didn't know how to take that. I was like, well, on one hand, he says, I am funny, but then he says my comic strip is not funny. So I completely changed the way that I came up with humor. What I ended up doing was I would just go around and see stuff, and as I would say stuff during the day that would make people laugh, I would turn that into a comic strip as opposed to sitting down blankly like, now I am going to come up with a joke. And that's why those were not funny, because when you're under the gun, but like if I say something to you and you crack up, I'm like, oh, that's funny, how can I turn that into a comic strip?
Right.
So I ended up, because of my friend's helpful criticism, that kind of helped me to be funnier in my strip. But to do like a daily, like how Gary Larson did with The Far Side, is unimaginable, like how consistently funny he was 365 days a year.
I wonder if he was super annoying to his friends and family, though, because he was constantly just like, blah, 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 like joke, 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 and like always doing the writing it down thing.
Yeah.
It's like in the middle of a conversation with somebody, if they're stopping your conversation every 3 seconds to like write down what you've just said.
Yeah,
a
there's a bunch of cartoonists that used to go out for breakfast like every Saturday in Connecticut, and anytime someone would say something funny, they'd all take out their pants. And
Was there a sense of like, that's my joke, no, that's my joke? Like, was
they always steal back and forth. from
And you
each
know
other.
what? The way that each person tells the same joke is always going to be different. And that's
Yeah.
that's like a fun exercise, I think, to do with friends, is like you have the same 3 prompts. You have the same like person, place, thing, or whatever you've drawn out of the hat. And then everybody has to do a gag comic or a one-page comic using those 3 words or that short prompt. And like everybody's thing is going to be super different.
Yep.
Our
There was a
minds all
thing-
work in such different ways.
Like 15 years ago, I got this thing where I think they had the script and they gave it to like 50 different cartoonists to do their variations of that. And I did one of those. It was really fun to see like how different they were.
And I've done exercises with this in big groups where you're given like a prompt like that, and then everybody has to like work quietly for 20 minutes, and you're sweating beads because you're like, I am not funny, I don't know how to write, I'm not good at this, and then you like anonymously all hand your comics to whoever's in charge, and then they read them and don't tell like who, and then when people laugh at your work, you're like, oh my gosh, I did it. Who knew? And then everybody else's is like hilarious in its own way. And it's just, I don't know, I love like seeing the ways that different people take information and process it.
Absolutely.
And it's all about your voice. Like your voice is unique and your voice is unique and my voice is unique. And it's like, you can tell the same story, but you're going to tell it in a different way.
Right.
And they say there are no new stories, but I don't know if I truly believe that.
Well,
I think
see,
that
the unique voice is such an interesting thing because when I first started trying to do a middle grade graphic novel, that's when they're like, have you read Raina's stuff? We want you to be Raina. I'm like, I can't be Raina.
No.
That position is filled. I'm like, Raina does
Jerry's like, I'm going to kill her.
I'm like, Raina does a really good job at being Raina. I'm like, that's not what I do. So if you let me do what I do, then, you know, but they wanted you.
but at the same time, like our books are both about like kids who go to school.
Right.
And like try to fit into social groups
Right.
and try to figure out who they are in
Right.
that space. And, you know, so they're like on paper, there's a lot of overlap, but I think like the way that you approach telling that story is totally different. Can you tell me a little bit about the difference between writing a comic strip versus writing a middle grade graphic novel?
So I think one of the big things is having the joke. You know, it really revolves around, you have 3 panels or 4 panels and then the payoff. And, you know, I used to hate for people to read my comic in front of me because,
Oh, yeah.
you know, so, and you're waiting and they're like, and you're waiting. And then, you know, hopefully they bust out laughing at the end. The worst thing is, I don't get it. And it's like, oh man, that's the worst thing. But so the punchline, the big payoff is the big thing with the comic strip. Whereas in a graphic novel, you can really pace it. You don't have to be funny like every page or every, but I think one of the things that helped from that is I had like a lot of funny moments that in my mind, I still had to say, okay, let's have something funny happen repeatedly. And I think especially having a book that deals with, you know, like African-American characters, I wanted to make it laugh out loud funny whenever I could, because I don't think that that's something that happens a lot. So that was kind of important for me to do.
I agree. It's super important. And in New Kid, Jordan has this like recurring joke where like when something good happens, like these little angels in diapers appear over both of his shoulders, and they'll have like a big banner that's like hallelujah, and you can just like hear the chorus singing, and then like he'll like turn the corner, and then like the moment gets kind of dashed by like some other element, and then you just see like the banner like fluttering to the ground, and sometimes the angels are like and it's and like you see this over and over again over the course of the story, and it builds in its funniness as you go. And did you have it all in the script, or did you have to like go back in over different drafts and like keep sticking things in?
Yes.
Okay.
So my thing was almost like, you know, cooking with a slow cooker that took like a year. And I might have read it and worked on it for like a year and a half, and I would go back in. So, because originally, like, so Jordan thinks that he's only one of the only black kids in the school, and he sees another black kid coming. And that's when the first time I had the Churbs, they have this sign that says, hallelujah, like, hey, you're not the only one. And then, so I hadn't written them in to be throughout the book. And then there's another part that I said, oh, you know what? Let's have them back again. And then I would go back, and then by the time I finished, I made them like characters that went through the entire thing, which I thought was kind of funny. Again, because I wanted to have stuff that was not realistic, because again, with kids of color, like it's so realistic and so heavy, and so there's not like a lot of like laugh out loud stuff. So, and I think that's part of the reason why I never bonded with books, because I didn't see characters like anyone that looked like me, something horrible happened to, you know. And
well,
then
what's the title of the fake book? In your story that the kid is like handed?
Yeah, it's the South Uptown book, The Mean Streets of South Uptown.
Yeah.
So I created a fictitious book called The Mean Streets of South Uptown, which is literally like every book that I had to read, you know, that was about kids like me, where it's like, you know, so-and-so Jackson, who is in his 3rd city in 3 months, and his dad is away, and his mom has to work 7 jobs, and, you know, this whole thing. And that the teachers, the librarians give them like, oh, here, you're really going to identify with this. And he's like, I don't identify. I don't identify with that at all, you know. But when I had kids, like I still have the kids, like
Happy Father's Day.
Yes, thank you.
You did a good job of
Thank you. Yes, I still have them. But when I saw them with like Wimpy Kid, like just reading it over and over and trading with their friends, and like the first time they were like, Dad, we have to go to the store on August 7th. I'm like, oh, to like GameStop to get like the new, Sonic. No, there's a book coming out. I'm like, you know when a book is coming out? It's like, wait. We're going to a store to get a book on the day it opened? Like, that was such a foreign concept. But when I see those kids like this, and when I first met Raina, I had illustrated the 0 Degree Zombie Zone for Scholastic. And Scholastic sent me to the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress. And the author and I go up on stage, and there's a crowd like this, right? About 50 people. And, we do our thing, and it was great. And then I'm packing up, and I look up, and all of a sudden, there are like 250 people in the audience, all like 10, 11-year-old girls, hugging copies of Smile. And I was like, who is this? And then Raina came out, and just like seeing the looks on their faces, I'm like, books can do this? It was the wildest thing. But I was like, I want to be her when I grow up. Because so my goal was if I could have like that kind of embrace with like what Jeff Kennedy did with Wimpy Kid, and what you've done, and feature kids of color that wasn't depressing and stuff like that, and even other kids could be like, oh, I'm Jordan Banks, even though I'm a 10-year-old girl from Ann Arbor. I'm like, that was like my dream.
Yes, I am also Jordan Banks, and I love this book so much, and I'm really glad that his character exists, but I also love some of the side characters that you've created for this book. One of whom is a girl named Alexandria, who wears a puppet on her hand at all times.
Yeah.
And a lot of times she like speaks through the puppet, and she's a little bit annoying. She kind of drives everybody crazy.
Yeah.
But she's got a story to tell, and you did her story such like beautiful due diligence in that book. And I'm curious about the inspiration for Alexandra's character.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
I didn't ask if this was coming, but here it is.
All right, so yeah. So my friend Carrie made this for me. So again, I wanted to do, and I'll have him talk.
Yeah.
This is Oscar. So I wanted to do stuff that was just silly sometimes. Again, because even though like nothing bad happens in the story, sometimes the perception is bad. Like even when I had done my Mama's Boys comic strip, I remember an editor going, well, this isn't gonna fly in like the Midwest because the story's so depressing. I'm like the mom owns a bookstore. And it's the kids in the bookstore. Like there was nothing bad that happened. But a lot of times the perception with young boys of color is that something bad is going to happen. So I knew that in order to tell that story, I had to have the cherubs, I had to have Alexandra with the puppet, I had it where like sometimes she's so happy that her feet are literally floating off the ground.
Yeah.
And if I didn't do that, I think that that there were people that would subconsciously think that Jordan's life is worse than it actually is. I'm like, he lives in a brownstone, and he's got his mom and his dad and a grandfather, so he's doing okay. He's leading a pretty good life, But I felt extra hard that I had to do that and do like, some outrageous stuff. So like, someone's eyes could pop out, or like the old Looney Tunes, that kind of thing. So Alexandra was definitely someone that I put in as like a comic relief. And then as I wrote more for her, I really started to like her and give her a backstory. And she's someone that I get probably as many emails about her, like, oh, I love her so much. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, well, she'll be in book 2.
Spoiler alert.
Yes.
There's so much I could say about the characters. So you mentioned before that it took you about an hour to get to school.
Yes.
In the mornings when you were going from where you lived to where your school was. And we see Jordan go through this process as well in the book. Oh, yeah. And we see him start out at home, and he's got like his hood on and he's not drawing pictures in a sketchbook. And then he sort of goes through this transformation of self by the time he gets from home to school, and then vice versa. And then he goes, this is exhausting. Like, wow, that hour that I spent going to school and I'm already exhausted.
Yes.
So this is code switching. This is going from one version of yourself to another based on who you're around. And I'm just curious, like, for yourself, like, do you remember doing this? And do you remember the first time that it like occurred to you that this is what was happening in your own life?
Oh, absolutely. So growing up in Washington Heights, so there's Harlem, and then the next section up is Washington Heights. So all my friends were Black and Latino. And so you had to have a certain amount of cool and swag so you wouldn't get picked on. And especially me being smaller, you know, light skinned, I didn't have like the cool fro like, you know, some of my friends did. So there was a certain demeanor that you had to carry yourself with, right? So I remember, you know, you get on the bus and you take your, you know, your hoodie and you put your glasses on, you just sit and frown on the bus like this because, you know, riding the bus with the public school kids, you know, and you're getting up and then, you know, you're not reading the book, you're not doing your homework, you're not writing in your sketch pad because you don't want to be teased or singled out. And then the public school kids get off and then you start going into inward so you can kind of relax and take the hood off and the shades off a little bit and you can take out your sketch pad, you know. But then as you got into like Riverdale, then it was the complete opposite. Like, you know, I couldn't have my design markers out because they would think that I was going to tag the bus, like write my name on the bus. And I remember even when I was in School of Visual Arts, going down to buy markers for a homework assignment, they would literally not sell me markers because they thought that I was going to use them for graffiti. And I'm like, look, here's my art, you know, my ID. Like, I need this for homework. Sorry, you know. So they wouldn't sell me that. So there was always a way that I had to, you know, because then again, if I went to Riverdale with the shades and the hood on and the markers, then everyone's like, all right, keep an eye on him, you know. So yeah, sometimes you get there and it was exhausting, and then, you know, going through that, and still like sometimes being one of the few African American men at a book fair, you know, and there'll be like 20 or 30 different authors, and I'm like, okay, so so I'm still very conscious. So you'll see sometimes I'll wear my Peanuts tie, you know, that kind of thing where it's like, oh, okay, Peanuts, hey, we have that in common, and we'll stop and have that. But yeah, that's been like, unfortunately, a lifelong process.
I'm grateful that you put all of this in the book unapologetically, and that you're not like really putting a commentary on it. You're just like, this is what it's like.
Right.
And so, I mean, I'm a white woman. Like, I've never literally had that experience, but seeing it through Jordan's eyes, having you, the storyteller, show it to us instead of telling it to us, it is so powerful. It's something I'm really, really grateful for, and thank you for depicting that. And thank you for just like everything you've depicted in this book. That's just pure.
Oh,
it's just this is it. This is what it looks like. And I think that's one of the great things about graphic novels, is that you see it and you don't have to have it explained to you. You see it without it being somebody else's experience. You see it as if it's your own experience. And that's true of every graphic novel I've read, especially the ones that are either autobiographical or inspired by somebody's life. It's such an amazing communication tool. And I'm just I don't know, I'm blown away every time I read a book that hits me like that. And so I'm grateful, Jerry.
Well, I'm so grateful that HarperCollins like let me tell my story, because as we were talking the other day, I was like so frightened that at some point they were going to have this major change that would, you know, and they literally said like, tell your story, and they printed it like exactly as I had intended.
Yeah. So as I've said, like, Jordan's a great character, and he's really kind and thoughtful. I love that about him, but he's also 12.
He's 12.
And he's got a lot to learn. What words of wisdom do you have for Jordan Banks?
So he doesn't have to try as hard, you know, and he's definitely in his head a lot, and like, you know, what do I do? Because the other thing is, in my community, how I grew up, it's like, So like the American dream is, you go to good school and you get educated and you do this and you move and you get a house, you do this. But sometimes in, where I was born, that community is like, oh, well, you're doing all that. You think you're too good for us now. And there's that like pullback to kind of keep you on the same level. So there's not that same option sometimes where people are like, hey, he made it, what a great thing that is. He did what he was supposed to. It's like, oh, you think you're all that now. So it was basically for Jordan, like, be yourself and it will let it come to you instead of always trying to, like certain things he does have to, like the code switching is like an important thing. So there's a lot of that, but he can't do it every step of the way or he'll just forget that he's a kid.
Right.
And he'll just lose out on that.
That's good advice, and that's good like life advice, I think, for any young person. Two things. First of all, where can people find you online?
So I've kept it really simple. Everything is my name. So jerrycraft.com is my website. Twitter is jerrycraft. Instagram is jerrycraft. Just everything is very simple.
I didn't have that option because I didn't want people to have to figure out how to spell Telgemeier every time. So I'm Go Raina everywhere.
Go Raina.
It works pretty well.
That works very well.
And then the second question is, do you have a graphic novel or two that you can recommend to the audience here?
Well, I'm sitting next to the queen of graphic
No one
novels.
needs to hear about my comics.
But
That's
no,
not
no,
interesting.
but
Yeah.
so again, this is what kind of started me. I was actually at a publisher, and they're like, "Oh, do you have any ideas for a graphic novel?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have this." And then they were like, "Have you read Smile?" And I'm like, "No, I have." And this was years ago. No, and it's like, "Oh, okay." And they, go to the vault and open it up, and the light just shines out, and they wash their hands, and they're like, "Take this home and read it." And I was like, okay. And I read it, and I was like, wow, this Go Rain is pretty good. So that was really the first where I started to solidify a real game plan. But then, again, like I said, everyone was like, be Raina. And it's like, oh, it was like, it's like having like Wonder Woman as a younger sister. It's like, why aren't you more like your younger sister? I'm like, I can't fly, but let me do my thing. So that was a big influence. American Born Chinese is one of my favorites,
Yes.
Jin Yang. And that I think was important because it showed me that you could actually talk about race and do some stuff that was kind of uncomfortable. El Defo was a really good one.
Yes.
I like that a lot. Roller Girl, I really liked. So yeah, there's so many, and I probably read more graphic novels now than other things,
Same.
Yeah. So there's some really, really powerful ones, and just so many different viewpoints of different things. And as I meet more and more people, then I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, let me buy that, and I'll buy it and like read it on the plane or something like that. So yeah, there's still a ton.
We're in a good space for middle grade graphic novels.
Yes. Oh, and Terry Lieberson stuff. I think it's
Yeah.
hysterical. Invisible Emmy, and I think she's got two more.
Positively Izzy
and just Jamie. Yeah, she's hysterical.
She is, and she also came up through comic strips.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yep.
that's a pathway forward.
Absolutely.
So can we open it up to questions from
Absolutely.
the audience? Raise your hand and shout it out. Yes. Hi.
So, first of all, I think you guys are great role models in showing that graphic novelists are extraordinarily articulate. So thank you for.
Oh.
Thanks.
So in certain countries where there's a strong cartoon or graphic novel history, like France does, do you ever translate your works or have them translated, I guess?
I actually got my first request to translate into another language, and it is in Albanian. It came like 2 weeks ago, like, yes, we'd like to translate this into Albanian. I'm like, okay.
Kids in
So,
Albania are gonna love.
I
your book.
know,
Like it's
right?
It's so exciting to think about that.
I just would love to hear how his name is said, or
Yeah. I've had my books translated into, at this point, it's probably about 25 different languages.
Wow. What was the first one?
The first language, I think it's either French or Spanish.
Yeah.
It was like one of my Babysitter's Club books got a French translation. Oh no, you know what? I think it was like Dutch.
Really?
Random, yeah.
Do you like? Are you psyched? Do you ask for copies of it?
They send them to me, and then I have like, it ended up being like the shelf in the center of my living room that's just like, here's all my foreign editions. So people come over to my house and they're like, I see, Raina, that you've got many copies of your book here in the living room. And I'm like, it's color coded, it's really pretty. And I ended up buying a rug that has like all the same colors in it. So it's like dark blue, teal blue, magenta, and purple. That's like the rug color. So.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Funny. Oh, it's weird. They also did New Kid as an audio book.
Right.
Which is interesting. And they first asked me to do it, and I was like, am I gonna have to like read and change the characters and stuff? But they let me listen to
Roller Girl.
no.
Oh no, Nimona.
Nimona.
Yeah.
And it has like a full cast with sound effects and that. So they did that for New Kid. And it's a full cast, so it's literally like listening to a Broadway play with your eyes closed. Like, so if there's a sound effect like, oh, someone's at the door, you hear the ding dong, and the feet going down to let them in and stuff like that. So that's really pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I see your hand in the purple. Yes. I have not done Babysitter's Club graphic novels since 2008. The newer ones are drawn and adapted by Gail Galligan, who used to be my assistant, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
She's awesome. Yeah, so I haven't done those books for a really long time.
Do you draw with pencil or do you do digital?
I start with pencil and then I ink right over my pencils with a brush, and then I scan them, and then they're colored digitally. What about you? Is your art?
This one was purely digital, and even to the point where I turned my handwriting into a font that's called Jordan Banks. So I have Jordan Banks bold, Jordan Banks italic, Jordan Banks bold italic, so I can type in and just get it so it looks hand lettered.
That's awesome.
But all the drawing was digital, which helps because like when we travel, like can you work on the road?
Yeah,
Yeah? You just bring paper and
I do.
really?
I can. My paper is just the size to fit on an airplane tray table, so I do a lot of my penciling while I'm flying.
Oh.
Yeah. Do you have your stuff with you?
Yeah,
to
this is
show it?
my mobile
Yeah.
studio.
There
So
it is.
this is what I work on when I'm in the hotel or stuck in an airport for like 11 hours, which has happened a few times
Yeah.
this year.
Is
So
it
I'm
a
like,
Cintiq?
It is a Wacom mobile studio.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it comes with a little like stylus pen,
Yes,
right?
I got my little stylus pen, and then I have like a little glove that goes on so that I don't smear the thing. So if you see me with the glove on, I'm not being pretentious. Like it's just part of it's like, oh, look at that guy with his glove. But yeah, this is
have a
the
glove.
yeah, and it only covers like 2 fingers, so it's just so that
Yeah.
you don't smear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, if you see me doing this, I'm not like, it's not like I'm drawing with the puppet on my hand. That would
Right.
be weird.
Actually, that'd be really awesome.
Yeah.
I saw another hand up. Hi.
What inspired you to write Smile or Sisters, like the memoirs?
I want to know that too.
Those were inspired by my life. That's how memoir works. It's, I am working with material from like a long time ago. So I often like look back through my memories and I'm like, what stories am I still telling people? What things are still relevant to my life now? What's sticky? Like what haven't I been able to forget after all this time? And I also kept journals when I was a kid. Did you keep journals or?
No, I didn't.
No? Okay. So you weren't writing stuff down as it was happening to you?
No.
That didn't start until later when you started writing down your friends' jokes and your own jokes?
Right.
Okay.
So
Oh, Jerry's got his,
this is a page from New Kid 2, which you
Yeah.
can't read, but it is here. But one of the cool things, I could like literally like zoom in, and I can take it, and if I can actually tilt it. If I need the lines in, I can type in my handwriting. I can like move stuff around. I can copy and paste. So I can like twirl it, you know, so if I need to go in there and get that ear at just a angle, you know. So this has been a lifesaver because with the amount of traveling, which you travel way more than I do, to have to stay on deadline, like I'm like, Raina, how do you do that? So
Because my books take 2.5 years to create, but that's including like all of the travel and all of the sitting on stages and talking with my friends things. That's part of the job.
Yeah.
I think our job is twofold. It's being a writer, a cartoonist, a creator, but it's also being an author. And the author stuff is this stuff. It's the sitting on stage and talking to your friends. It's signing books. It's meeting your readers and connecting with them.
because they need to see you're a real person. Right?
I mean, it's really great. Not
Yeah.
every person can do that, and we can't physically be everywhere all the time. Our main job is still making things, so it's really important to like preserve the time that you need to create New Kid 2 and
Yeah.
whatever comes after that. But this is wonderful. Like I think this benefits us in a different way, and it benefits our readers too, just because there's this connection and we get to meet each other. And yeah, no, I'm pleased. I like them both, but you have to keep them in balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have another hand up in the audience. What was that? We're kind of friends at the end of the book, right? So yeah, I try not to talk too much about like what happens after the story. Like that's the private, personal part of my life. Do we have any other questions for Jerry?
All right.
Yes.
So she's the one that wanted to take your
Yes.
seat earlier.
The interviewer that was almost up here today on stage. Yes.
I've got one for both of you.
Cool.
Do you have a favorite book or comic strip that you've done?
That we've done, like your
Or,
favorite.
like, just separately, do you have a favorite?
Favorite comic strip or favorite? I mean, I was always a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan, and I'm a big For Better or For Worse fan. That's
Yeah.
probably my favorite comic strip and biggest influence.
Do you know her personally, Lynn Johnson?
I've met her.
Okay.
She's a sweetheart.
Yeah, she really is.
She's salty, but she's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, For Better or For Worse was always one of my favorites. Peanuts, just because it was so iconic. You know, growing up with Fat Albert, again, to see kids of color that went like everywhere, like national, and so many people our age were like, oh yeah, I grew up with that. Even though in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, they did play in the junkyard, which is kind of weird, you know? So I hope if they ever updated it that like they, you know, be in like a real playground or something like that. And then, yeah, so definitely, and Far Side was just hysterical all the time. I look forward to reading that every day. And Dilbert for a while was one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Nothing like cubicle humor.
Yes.
It's the best. Kids love it. Any other questions? Yes, hi. Hi, friend.
So I didn't know anything about your syndicated career. Having been on the inside, is that an industry that's going to continue?
The question is the syndicated comic strip industry going to continue?
So I feel
Great
like
question.
this middle grade graphic novel is one of the first things that I've got into that is still newish and has a trajectory that I'm actually happy with. Because when I started, you know, when I started in advertising, it was like, that's when the ad business just really like imploded and people were like running to get out the industry. And then I worked at King Features right when like the cost of newsprint was astronomical and then newspapers started going out of business, you know, so that was kind of a rough thing. And like the continuity strips all kind of vanished for like, you know, more humor. And then I worked at Time Warner, right when AOL purchased that, and then that just like, so for a while I just thought I was like the Grim Reaper of like, you know, but I don't know, they're so, like the comic strips now are so small on paper, I don't know if it has that kind of shelf life. I hope it does, but also a lot of kids don't grow up with newspapers the way, like the Sunday Funnies was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I have never seen a kid read the Sunday Funnies like in the last 10 years, maybe?
Kids have the internet now. They don't have to wait till Sunday morning to read comics.
Yeah, or Saturday morning to watch cartoons on
Right.
TV. Yep.
What a
Oh, my buddy.
yeah.
You still have a question? You had your hand up. Oh, okay, if you do, let me know.
Well,
Okay.
he says he has a question, but it's about the book, and he doesn't want to spoil it for others who haven't read it.
Oh,
Are
so
you sure? We can do it.
you have like a spoiler? Okay. Okay. All right, then
you.
come to me afterwards.
Oh, no, I want to hear it.
Okay, go ahead.
Can we do it?
Let's see.
Was there a reason why you put a segment in the book where the teacher reads?
Oh, Jordan's sketchbook. So, yes. Let's see, how involved can I get? So,
We have like 5 minutes.
okay, so there's a scene where Jordan's teacher finds his sketchbook and reads through it, and her reaction is, "Why are you so angry, Jordan?" And that is so much of the stuff that I've done that, like, for example, in El Defo, okay, a girl with a hearing impairment, and if someone says or does something mean to her, it's so easy to say, that's not right, you know, you need to respect her and you need to do this, right? But I feel like with sometimes kids of color, if they complain about someone touching their hair or someone, you know, mispronouncing their name or something like that, it's not seen in the same way that the character in El Defo or some of the others, where it's like a more sympathetic character. So I wanted to show that, you know, instead of her saying, "You're right, I shouldn't have read your personal property," and saying that this is angry, he's like, "I'm not angry. This is my diary. This is things that really happen." So instead of you saying, "Wow, I'm sorry that this happened," she's almost denying him his real emotional response of like not being happy when these things happen. So yes, that was a lot of me in there.
I think that was a great question and not too spoilery.
Yes.
In fact, do we have one more question from the audience? Bring it on home. You want to?
What do you want to inspire your readers with most? Like, I find the more I learn about different cultures or races, I'm always kind of like, oh, gosh, I didn't know I was so stupid. Like, why didn't I think of this? Why wasn't I more sensitive? Is there something like that that you would want to have your readers learn, or your kids as a parent?
Oh, absolutely. Like, there's so many conversations that I wanted to open with this, like with the librarians who only give, you know, kids of color books about police brutality or slavery or civil rights. I'm like, they're still kids, you know? And so, yes, please give them something that is sometimes uplifting and shows that they will actually make it to be 20 and 21 and 22. So yeah, teachers, and even things like, I put a lot of other things like, you know, so many kids like, "Oh yes, that's my friend, he's Japanese." And the kid's like, "I'm not Japanese, I'm Chinese. Like, you've known me for 10 years. Why don't you just, if you could just take 2 minutes to really know how important that is to me, or how to pronounce my name, or like these little things of just respect that everyone can do." It's like, "Oh, well, that's," you know, I had a comic in here where it's like, "Oh, that's too hard to remember." It's like, yes, but you can then go to Starbucks and remember a latte, cafe, mocha, china, frappuccino with like 10 names, you know, or if it was a character from Star Wars and anime, you could say the name perfectly.
Right.
But if it's a kid that you've been in school with for 10 years, you still mispronounce it, you know? So just a lot of kindness and respect that I would like to build conversation that everyone can have. Well, you're welcome.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Let's give Jerry a hand. Yeah.
This program was recorded on June 16th, 2019 at the Ann Arbor District Library.